Hi, I'm Eric, and I'm a social studies educator, historian, and host of this, the Everything is a Primary Source podcast. I'm also an avid collector of popular culture artifacts. I love what I find at thrift store outlets, garage sale leftovers, and what I spot just making my way around the built world. I enjoy sorting through boxes of free books and magazines, not to mention online collections like Internet Archive, and of course the Library of Congress. But you don't need to spend your time digging through bins or following online rabbit holes to get a look into the past. The movies and TV we watch, the books we read, and the games we play are all documents of the past. So is fashion, food, music, toys, even the roads we travel on and the places we live and work in. Everything is a primary source. This podcast is the result of exhibiting these kinds of artifacts in public, getting passersby to select an item they connect with, and then chatting with me to see what it says about the time, place, and people who made it. The conversation you are about to hear, therefore, is your history, my history, our history, through popular culture. Clement is here, all the way from Houston, Texas, and how are you liking the conference so far? Have you been to this conference before?
I have not. This is my first conference attendance, and I'm enjoying it very well. Surprised by all of the inclusive resources that are available as long as you have your teacher email. So that's really great. And I found great resources to help impact learning in the classroom.
Be prepared for a flood of emails in the next few weeks,
Yes.
and probably
Yes.
spending most of your Christmas break sorting through them and deciding which ones to keep and which ones not. So you're from Houston, Texas.
Yes.
Have you been to Boston before?
I have.
You have?
I am a speech and debate coach, so we come yearly to Harvard's tournament. It's a big national draw, and that's in February. So typically when I come to Boston, it is on par for the rain, snow, etc. So yeah,
And you get to bundle up, and it's not. Does Houston get? I know a couple years ago you had a really bad cold snap, but it's a pretty moderate climate. Or
it is, especially this year. But yes, we do have some snaps. We have some freezes. We snow occasionally in a bluest of moods. But for the most part, it's pretty mild. We have mild winters, and it just will have cold fronts come in and out.
So tell me a little bit about your teaching career and where you are. I mean, clearly, if you're bringing students to Boston, to Harvard, I've heard of that place, for debate, you're obviously a very active teacher. You're not just, here's a bunch of worksheets, fill them out, kind of thing. Where'd you get your start?
So I will try not to be so lengthy, so I'll sum it up with, when I graduated from the University of Houston, go Cougs, I had a political science undergraduate degree, but there was a job posting for educational research, specifically reading intervention. The question was asked, at what age do you need to intervene for students to turn around, if they're having difficulties with reading?
Yeah.
And so we ran that project for a long time, and that was my foray into education. But to fast forward to today, so now I teach at the middle school level, all levels of history, so geography, U.S. history, Texas history, and I was a debater myself starting in middle school, and so as I have become an educator, I continue coaching speech and debate teams.
I had I teach high school, but I had a middle school teacher tell me recently, she said, how'd she put it? She said, the wonderful chaos that is middle school.
Yes.
Is that what how would you describe middle school? Is that accurate?
I would add to the chaos that it is a unique time in everyone's life that is irreplicable. So I work a lot with, when I'm doing the debate, it's with high school students. I teach college students at night English. So I'm working the gambit of ages, and I still find in middle school something is special, unique, and it's a time for a lot of growth, exploration.
Yeah.
And students don't have, they're more themselves. They're more themselves since they don't have a lot of that social awareness that comes later. So it's great to see the authenticity of the student.
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. I have a lot of freshmen this year in particular, and they're basically middle schoolers until the end of their freshman year.
Yes.
They're still, and I see a lot of that in them.
Yes.
When you put it that way, I absolutely see it that way. What would you say about the state of social studies education right now? Is there great things about being a social studies educator in this era? Are there challenging things?
Both. I would say the greatest thing, as I tell the students, is that social studies is an English class with facts. So I think it's great that students hone the skills, reading, writing, critical thinking, which is really one of the most important skills. And I don't know many other subjects that allow students to do such critical thought and to connect what's going on in their lives today with yesterday and to think about tomorrow.
Right.
So social studies has its own great uniqueness that it's not really replicable and is great because students must take social studies throughout their academic careers. The challenges are but the challenges that are present, a lot of it stems from maybe people have not learning how to critically think or not learning how to truly dissect history. So we are divided and we are confused and there is a lot of passion and polarization, but the social studies classes could bridge all of our dissension. And again, we can help people think and really help the dissection of the past so we're not repeating it, which is what I thought we always say history and social studies is about. So not only is it tangible in learning how to vote or what voting is or what the electoral, so you'll get some of the civics education, but just connecting the dots for better.
Well, I like what you're saying about English, and they're having a conference right now in Boston too. The English teachers. And so it's like they're in our buildings. Those are always our buddies, right? Because we're humanities people, and But I like the way you put it. It's like we have the English stuff, but we also have the facts on our side. That we can point to the hard stuff. And show you why the soft stuff is connected to it. And I would say that the struggle component. One of the things that we're really emphasizing for our council, New Hampshire Council for Social Studies, is putting the social back in social studies. Because you're absolutely right about that. When you have all these facts to go through, the technical stuff, it's there and you can kind of work through it, but talking about it. Like, have you ever had this happen where you intend to maybe start class with a conversation or something like that, maybe spend 15 minutes on it and then get to something else. Next thing you know, it's 60 minutes later, you're still talking.
Absolutely.
I'm assuming you're okay with that. Right. Okay. So I think most people in this building would be okay with that because that's our job. We are social. You're being social. I'm being social. We're being civil and social, and that's what helps break through.
It does.
So you said bridging. We could also say kind of break through barriers. Through that. Instead of always putting up walls. So let's round out that conversation. Let's see how good we can segue. What was the topic that you chose for?
So the topic that I chose on the table, I see a lot of baseball memorabilia, and I see a specific player there by the cup, and what I really thought... Ortiz, David Ortiz. And so I really wanted to connect this to what I had just learned. I was taking a course at Rice University on Houston history this past semester, and I learned that, let me backtrack a little bit before that. At the University of Houston, we always say that our sports teams are one of the first to integrate collegiate athletics in the South as far as basketball with I just forgot his name. He had the towel, the basketball coach. Wow. It'll come to me. But so our football coach and basketball coach did integrations to both teams, and both of their names just left me. It's the cold, but I'll come back to it. And
we can dub it in later and just like.
And so I thought that was interesting. So I always knew that from undergrad, but I just learned this past semester. That our professional team also had a lot to do with that in building the Astrodome and in getting a franchise, the Astros, from the Major League Baseball Association. we did not want the bad press in Houston. We didn't want the Birmingham riots and protests. And so to spearhead us as more of a sports city, we did one day called a blackout where we just totally desegregated as a city. We took down all signs. We welcomed everyone into department stores, to restaurants, to hotels. And the city leaders, the politicians of the city worked with the business leaders and the media, and they just agreed, we're going to do this in secrecy, in silence. We're not going to publicize it. We're not going to write about it. We're just going to do it. And then that led into this ushering of, we can now get support from different black residents in Houston to vote for building the Astrodome, and then the city went to the Major League Baseball Association and also said, not only will this Astrodome be air conditioned and be grand, but it will be desegregated, and so will the hotels around the area, etc. So as players of color come into the city, there are no barriers. And that just really led to a bigger desegregation around the city.
And Houston has, it's a pretty modern, I mean, it's an old city, but it also has a very modern feel to it, modern history to it. A lot of computer, isn't Texas Instruments from there? And that's related to the NASA presence there. And that all has to do with its natural geography because it has such access to the ocean for the big things you need to build a space program.
Absolutely.
In Houston. And so it's had a couple of rebirths. And if I'm not mistaken, was it the very first Juneteenth celebration in Houston, right?
Absolutely, yes.
So it seems to have all of those components of a modern place, new opportunities, new chances. When did the Astros come in? Oh, that's the 60s, right?
The 60s,
okay, so that would be consistent with all
in
the
early 60s, yes.
But instead of, I guess what you're describing is the kind of like backwards design of the other teams that were integrating.
Yes.
It was like, let's get all of our stuff organized ahead of time.
Yes.
That way we can start this way.
Yes.
Rather than, so that's perfect. Let's talk, and the question that I'm going to choose, I think, is a perfect one because we've already kind of addressed it. What ideas or behavior does this convey? Right? So that kind of, I mean, first of all, the Astros, space age name.
Yes.
And they introduced AstroTurf, correct?
Yes.
Look, everything about the team was like, we are modern. We may as well be playing on the moon.
Yes.
Because we're so forward thinking with all this stuff. And they initially joined the National League. Now they're part of the American League. I don't even know why they changed it. But so that was like, I remember the National League at that time was full of that kind of different look. Like their uniform was like super colorful. It had like the purple and the orange and stuff. Yes. I used to go to Expos games in Montreal when I was younger, when they existed. And they were kind of rivals because they both arrived around the same time. They're expansion teams. And the Expos also had an indoor stadium with AstroTurf. And they also had pretty garish-looking uniforms. And so it was like the Astros, Expos, they both have similar-sounding names. Expos have a history. They're called that because of Expo 67, which was a World's Fair in 1967. And they're like, yeah, everyone will know what that means after for the next 50 years. Like, no, we didn't. But like, whatever, Expos. And so you have that, and then the other the basketball team in Houston, the Rockets, right? So when did they show up?
Oh, that's a good question. Oh, my sports history is failing me. I'm not quite sure at the moment.
I want to say probably 70s, maybe around the same era, maybe. So it's like Astros, Rockets, and the WNBA team is
Comets. They were
Comets.
Comets.
So all these like celestial, astronomy related things, modern city, you know, glistening in the sunlight and everything. And then you got the Oilers. Like, so we're gonna take fossil fuels, and it's like instead of the heavens, we're having a team that's about the depths of the earth, right? And so the Oilers, it's kind of weird that and then they get replaced eventually by the Texans, which is like, I don't know, I hate to say it, just kind of like a
general,
right? And it has a steer, for the symbol. But what you're saying is that they were conveying more than just space-related stuff,
and
but it was about society.
Yes,
they were trying to. And so I need to ask, did that effort work?
It did.
So
and they were surprised. They were surprised that it worked so well, especially because the university's students were having those demonstrations that we're used to, like in other cities. They weren't necessarily violent per se, but they were big, they were loud, they were expressive. So the city and everyone was just amazed at how well it worked. And it's interesting you say, and I should note, it was not about the integration of the city was not about human rights or what's right for people. It really was a financial aspect of, but we want the Astrodome, we want a Major League Baseball team, so we want the hotels full, the department stores full, restaurants. So it really was a financial, and as you were saying, it was to increase Houston. We said, like, we are the city of the future, so let's go forward and let's integrate. That will be the future.
That was... Here in Boston, we have, a very strong abolitionist movement in the early 19th century, mid 19th century. That was one of the big arguments of their cause, was moral reasons, financial reasons, whatever. Modern countries do not have slavery.
Right.
So if we want to barrel towards the 20th century and be a modern country and join the ranks of France and Britain, and we can't have this as part of So it's like there is that coming up again, right? Or before, I suppose, where that's like part of the selling package. These countries aren't going to want to associate with us.
Right.
Because as their societies and their culture evolve away from this, they're eventually going to say, we don't want to deal with a country whose biggest economic output comes from slave labor.
Yes, correct.
Right?
Correct.
So it's like a pattern that's repeating itself.
Yes.
So it wasn't necessarily, you're saying, for the civil rights component of it. It's more like, we're not going to get all these visitors that we want if they visit the old Houston.
Correct.
We want a new Houston.
Yes.
And I think that's, involving sports seems to be a natural thing.
Yes.
They go hand in hand because
do.
sports oftentimes act as like a microcosm for larger things.
And a unifier. Right. Everyone watches sports.
They can cheer for the team.
Yes.
And they've been pretty good over the last
They have.
few decades. I don't follow Major League Baseball as close as I used to.
Okay.
But I know I hear the Astros come up pretty frequently, and so totally separate from that.
Yes.
One of my favorite movies, especially in October, is My Best Friend is a Vampire. Have you ever seen that one?
I don't think so.
It was filmed in Houston. And I only recognize that because I just, like, there's scenes where they're driving around the highways, and I've always felt the Houston skyline. I've actually never been to Houston, but
you must go.
I gotta go. Well, I know it's somebody I can stay with now, right?
Yes.
I'll be there next week. So the skyline with the big highways coming back, and it's so futuristic looking.
Yeah.
But that movie takes place there, and they never say where it is. Like, he goes to Milton High School, which I don't think is a real place.
I don't know.
And it's just like generic, but for some reason it's like they don't hide the fact that it's Houston.
Right.
You know, it's like, it's not like they just did generic city in America. It's very clearly Houston, Texas, but without actually ever saying it. And I wonder if that was another kind of marketing thing on the side of the city. Seems to have that kind of mentality built into it, where it's like, hey, silly, funny movie. It's actually a really fun movie, but we can just kind of show ourselves, put ourselves in pop culture.
Yes.
So, hey, next time you want to, you're not going to see any rockets launched here, but Mission Control's here. You got that. So, I mean, it's on my list. I want to go to
Please,
Houston.
you're welcome.
So, Clement, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for being on the Everything is a Primary Source podcast. And take care.
Thank you.
Popular culture, by definition, connects and unites us, and proves that people of different backgrounds, in fact, have a lot in common with one another. I hope you enjoyed this conversation, at least in part, for that reason. If it connects with you and you'd like to add to it, or any of the podcast episodes, just visit everything-history.com and search for the Everything is a Primary Source project, which can be found in the classroom section of the website. We'd love to hear what you have to say. Be sure to rate and share this podcast wherever you are listening to it now, and follow Everything is a Primary Source on social media, including YouTube and especially Instagram. Thank you for listening to the EPS podcast, where everything is a primary source.